Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. Today's video, I'm doing another deep dive on artists, and this time it is my favorite guitar player of all time, Jimi Hendrix. Yes, such a groundbreaking guitar player, really pushing psychedelic music and the use of distortion, feedback, the whammy bar, all that. Had some absolutely fantastic music, some great albums, and maybe one of the greatest performances we've seen at Woodstock. Anyway, so I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite artists here on Jason the Old Millennial. Hello everybody, hope everybody's doing well here on a Monday afternoon. Another beginning of another week. A week from today, it's actually my birthday, so I'm planning on doing a live stream, a birthday live hangout and chat. Maybe I can get some friends to come along. I got some gifts to open. Yeah, so hopefully I have a good time next week. Anyways, but today I am going to talk about my favorite guitar player, absolutely phenomenal, groundbreaking, one of a kind, Jimi Hendrix, and all that he did. And I've known about Jimi Hendrix ever since I feel like I was young. He's like one of those guys that you always kind of heard about or knew about or seen images of him. He has a great look to him. He is a great dresser. Think of that kind of almost kind of like afro look with the bandana across his head and the very flashy clothing, the psychedelic. He definitely hit during that psychedelic era. He was just perfect for that time period and his playing and everything. And of course his music has been huge on the radio since I was a kid. I'd say mostly like Purple Haze was definitely huge on the radio. That's the biggest one I feel like. You got stuff like Hey Joe and All Along the Watchtower is probably the other big one that I always heard on the radio. It's definitely been one of his highlights of his career. Yeah, and it's just the way he plays. I don't know. It's just, I've never seen anybody play like him. And it's been 60 some years later, or maybe not quite that long, but about 60 years almost since he debuted. And it's like, I've never heard anybody play as good as him. Like no one's perfected it like he has. So that's pretty good that you've become the best guitar player and no one's topped you in 60 years, in my opinion. That's only my opinion on that. But anyway, so get a little bit into his life and what happened. Obviously, we all know he had a bit of a tragic ending to his life. Short career, only 3 albums total. But we'll start at the beginning. He was born in 1942 in Seattle, Washington. Washington's kind of become this beacon of rock music later on. And he started there. He found a ukulele in the garbage, actually, and that's where he kind of got introduced to the guitar by ukulele with one string. And he was listening to Elvis records at the time. So we're talking late 50s, and was playing with the one string, listening along and trying to develop his skill that way, which is kind of crazy. And I often believe that people that are this talented as Jimi Hendrix and a lot of the musicians are God-given. I feel like God just gives certain people just the ability to be creative in music and to come up with interest and to be able to learn it quickly and faster, and also innovate. I think Jimi Hendrix was one of those people who just had a God-given gift and a desire too. He had a God-given desire and gift for music, and I think we see at a very young age, obviously, because usually you get that and then you practice and then you develop into a great player like he has. But actually, he bought an acoustic guitar when he was 15 for $5, which would be $53 today, and he started playing on the acoustic guitar. Of course, he loved listening to a lot of blues records. He was listening to Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Howlin' Wolf, and Robert Johnson, kind of some of the great guitar players of that time. And he kind of developed a skill listening to those records, basically. His mother, unfortunately, died of cirrhosis of the liver in 1958 when he was 16, so he had that tragedy young. Anyways, and so he played with a friend named Sammy Drain and his brother, who played the keyboard. So that's how he started playing with his friend and his brother, again, developing guitar playing skills that way. Like me, I play the guitar and I can never get as good as Jimi Hendrix, and I practice every once in a while, not every day. He probably had to, people like that, they just love it so much, they just practice. That's how you get great at it. And it just clicks with you, like I think it did for him. In 1959, he attended a concert of Hank Ballard and the Midnighters and met the guitarist Billy Davis. And this was a very important meeting, as Davis actually showed him some guitar licks and let him play with the band for a short time. So that's where he really kind of learned from a professional how to be a professional guitar player and throwing some tricks and stuff like that on the guitar that he might not have known at that time. So this was a big moment for him in developing his guitar skills and getting into being in a band anyways. And we'll see him go through a lot of different bands and, move around and try to find the right place for him. Jimi forms a band called the Velvet Tones. But then he realizes he really needs an electric guitar, not an acoustic guitar. And he talked his father into buying him one. So that's where he gets his first electric guitar to play in this band. And good thing too. He definitely wouldn't be the same without him getting an electric guitar. He also joined a professional band called the Rocking Kings at this time. And this is all in like high school. Like he's like a teenager and he's doing all this. He would drop out of high school and he was a bit of trouble. He had some trouble, of course. I don't know if it was just the way he grew up or his mom dying and all this. But he got into a lot of trouble. He got arrested for riding in a stolen car, and he was given the choice basically to either go to prison or join the army, which was something, I don't know if they still do that, something I know I've heard they do, and that's how people get in the army sometimes. You get arrested and feel like army's better than prison. So that's what happened to Jimi, and he enlisted in the army in 1961, which is kind of interesting. That's kind of something that not talked a lot about, but Jimi Hendrix, that he was in the military, because he seems like this, hippie psychedelic guy that would be, against that. But of course, it was not all because he wanted to. He also did not want to go, but interesting that he was in the army for a short time. He was stationed in Fort Campbell in Kentucky, and he absolutely hated being in the army. Obviously, there's a lot of musicians, I don't see him as army material normally, because the army is definitely more, regulated, more strict rules like that. And I feel like musicians are more like, don't want strict rules at all. They want to kind of play at their own style. They want to be a little freer. That's why they pick the career that they have. Anyway, so obviously, as you see, he really did not like being in the army. And he spent a lot of his free time playing guitar when he wasn't, doing his duties. There was a fellow serviceman, though, named Billy Cox, who heard him play and liked what he heard, and he also played the bass. And so he got together with Jimi Hendrix, and they started playing together, Jimi playing guitar and Billy playing the bass anyways. And they would play together at the clubs, and they called themselves the Casuals. As I said, Jimi Hendrix was not a very good soldier. He didn't really have desire to be good, I don't think. And he wasn't the most cooperative, I guess, soldier. Disciplined soldier, as you need to be when you're in the army. They really pound discipline into you. So it wasn't really for him. And he got in trouble quite a bit, in the army for not doing what he's supposed to. You see, and then in 1962, so he enlisted 61. 1962, he is honorably discharged. So he only lasted about a year in the army, and they're like, you know what, this isn't for you, Jimi. We don't think this is the right place for you, and we'd rather you not fight for our country, I guess. I guess a good thing, because this is before, I guess, the Vietnam War really we started getting involved in that. But yeah, so Hendrix and Billy, they both got, discharged from the army, and they started playing together in Clarksville, Tennessee, calling themselves the King Casuals, with K and K, I guess, is kind of the idea there. So yeah, I started out in Tennessee, which you think is more of a country place, but and there's some blues, Memphis and all that. So Tennessee's a good place for country and blues. So a good place for him to start, I guess. And he's probably stationed not too far from there anyway. So, but it was here where he really learned to really be a good guitar player, playing along with other guitar players and seeing other guitar players. He kind of learned a lot of the tricks, watching them, and learned how to do stuff like playing behind his back, playing with his teeth, kind of stuff that he would do later on, which I always found pretty impressive. Anytime I can do. I play guitar, never tried behind my back, never tried with my teeth. I don't even understand how that works, but it must be more showmanship. Because one thing you think about Hendrix is not only a great guitar player, but a great showman. He was fun to watch on stage, and I think it was during this part he kind of learned that showmanship of really, which he would use later, really being great in front of a crowd, had a lot of charisma and all that. He would also start backing other musicians at this time. He had enough skill. He would play with Wilson Pickett, Sam Cooke, Jackie Wilson, and Tina Turner are some of the names that he would play with. So some pretty big names he was playing guitar for at this time. But he was kind of tired of being playing for these people, and kind of wanted to be more, I think, in front and more. Of course, if you're playing for somebody, you have to do what they say. I think he wanted a little more freedom of choosing what he wanted to play and all that. So he would eventually kind of move away from that. He would actually move to Harlem and try to start himself more solo, I think, type work and more freedom, like I said. So we jumped to 1964, and he won first prize at the Apollo 13 amateur contest. So got noticed there in Harlem, which is kind of well known for, the Apollo is really well known for acts like this, and getting people noticed. He then became a guitarist for the Isley Brothers at this point. So he went back to playing with a pretty big group, the Isley Brothers. He only did that for about a year, then left them again. I think he was getting tired of it. And and you'll see he still has that problem of being a rule, obeying by the rules, because he would then join Little Richard's touring band called the Upsetters. So he was playing with Little Richard, which was one of the hugest names in the 50s, and now we're getting the 60s. I suppose I don't know if he's as big, but he's still obviously one of the big names one of the biggest all-time names in the 1950s rock movement, one of the originals, so a pretty big deal. He got to play with Little Richard, but he was fired in 1965 for being tardy, for the wardrobe, and also his stage antics. So the stuff that we love him for today, obviously didn't. When you're trying to play in the back, and Little Richard's supposed to be the one that's supposed to be the star, and you're trying to upshow him, I suppose that'll get you in trouble. Probably a good idea. He eventually got on his own because he was, like I said, it seemed like he played for a lot of different people, but had a hard time staying in the background. He then joined the band Curtis Knight and the Squires for about 8 months. And some music that he wrote made into on one of the records. So it's the first time he got to start writing some music that would get recorded as well at this time. Because he did write some music, of course, some of his famous stuff he wrote. So he was a songwriter as well as could sing, and play guitar. So a very talented individual that he developed in the 60s here. So in 1966, he moves to Greenwich Village and formed the band Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. What a cool name. Jimmy James and the Blue Flames. He developed much of his playing style during this time. I guess that's when he, 66, we're starting into the psychedelic era. So I'm sure this is when use of feedback and distortion and using the whammy bar for different notes and playing around with that with his blues, because he's a blues guitar player who then played around with that and kind of really did well in the psychedelic era, which I suppose a lot of blues players, psychedelic music was a good place to go to as well in the rock industry. Yeah, so this is where he kind of develops a lot of what we know him to do at this point in 1966 with this band. He wasn't making a lot of money with the group, and so he had to go back to Curtis Knight and make some money and be with him for a little bit, and then kind of left them again and went on his own. This is where we finally kind of starts getting noticed, and his career starts off here. And it kind of starts with him playing at the Cheetah Club, and he gets discovered by Keith Richards' girlfriend, Linda Keith, Keith Richards' girlfriend's last name is Keith also. It's weird. But anyway, so we have to thank a lot to Keith Richards' girlfriend for kind of discovering him here and really liking what she heard from Jimi Hendrix, and kind of introduced Jimmy to Keith. You know, obviously it was huge. I mean, you're talking about 66. I mean, the Rolling Stones are doing like Aftermath and Between the Buttons, and or before they did Between the Buttons. So, I mean, Rolling Stones definitely was one of the biggest bands. I mean, the Beatles were the biggest, then Rolling Stones is pretty close behind them at this point. They're having some pretty big hit records at this moment. So Keith Richards was definitely one of the great guitar players at this time in the 60s. So probably a good person to get friends with. So Keith did recommend him to their manager, Stones manager, Andrew Oldham, and producer Seymour Stein to listen to Jimmy and maybe, you know, sign him on or whatever. But as happens to some, he got rejected by the manager and producer, I guess. Didn't like what they heard from Jimi Hendrix. Definitely a big mistake for them. Don't know what they heard they didn't like. I don't know. Maybe it was too new or different than they were expecting, and they didn't think it would last. I don't know. They didn't like what they heard, I guess. He was then recommended to Chase Chandler of the Animals, who was getting into managing at that point. So Chase Chandler playing with the Animals, quits the Animals, I guess, at this point, and was starting to wanted to manage other groups, maybe an artist, and so got in touch with Jimi Hendrix. And this is definitely a big moment. He definitely liked what he saw, and he especially liked, he liked the song called Hey Joe. It's a song from a guy named Billy Roberts, and he's been looking for an artist to give Hey Joe to. He thought if he gave the Hey Joe to the right artist, he'd make a big hit out of it. And he kind of saw that in Jimi Hendrix, saw Jimi Hendrix play, and thought Jimi Hendrix could make Hey Joe into a hit song. Anyway, so he gave it to Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix made a version of Hey Joe, really loved it anyways. And that kind of started off their relationship as manager and player anyways. So he kind of signed on to be his manager, and came up with the idea to bring him to London. Animals, of course, are a British invasion band. So he decides to bring him to London, actually, and signs him with a contract with ex-Animals manager Michael Jeffrey. Chandler recruits a guitar player. He thought he needed a bass and a drummer to make kind of a trio band. He thought a three-person band would be perfect for Jimi Hendrix to showcase his music. So he recruited Noel Redding to play the bass, and Mitch Mitchells to play drums. And so that's what forms what we know as the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Jimi Hendrix, Noel Redding, and Mitch Mitchell, who all were really good players on their own right. So yeah, that's the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And they were playing around Europe, and they were doing very, very well, playing some of their stuff like Hey Joe, and I think that's where they introduced like Purple Haze and The Wind Cries Mary, some of the stuff that's going to be on their first album. They were playing around and getting very good response there in Europe. He was then signed on to Track Records at that part, and they recorded their first song, Hey Joe, in 1966. So Hey Joe is his first single that comes out in 66, and the song peaks at number 6 in the UK. So it does well, top 10 song, and really. So Hey Joe's kind of song that kind of puts him on the map in the UK anyways. In 1967, Purple Haze also comes out, and it reaches number 3, and The Wind Cries Mary reaches number 6. Like I said, those are kind of the first 3 big songs that they put out there, and all do top 10, you know. So 67 obviously is when he just explodes onto the scene of music. It's crazy because he's not around for very long. It feels like he explodes on there, and just, you know, everybody's just super impressed with what they're hearing. So he comes out with his debut album, which I do own, called Are You Experienced? And there they are, Jimi Hendrix, Noel Redding, and Mitch Mitchell. Great album cover, very psychedelic. I mean, really envelops the psychedelic era very well with his hammer, and there's another picture of them in the back. Anyways, so yeah, first record, one of the biggest records of the psychedelic period, and one of my favorite records of 1967, to be honest. Absolutely fantastic record. It's almost like a greatest hits album. Some of his best music, I think, is on this album. It's my favorite Jimi Hendrix Experience album, to be honest. I mean, when you got stuff like Purple Haze is my favorite song from them. That guitar riff at the beginning is gotta be one of the most iconic guitar riffs of all time, and just guitar playing just out of this world. Just I can't imagine listening to this. Purple Haze is the first song on the album. I can't imagine listening to this album in 1967 and going, what is this? This is crazy good. This is something I never heard before. But you got Hey Joe is another absolutely fantastic song. A little bit of a slower song for him, but a really cool song. Love the background singers in this one, and just the whole thing is Joe's going on to kill his girlfriend because she cheated on him. It's the whole point of the song. Hey Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand? It's kind of somewhat shocking lyrics when I first heard it as a kid, and go like, what is this song? What's going on with Joe? But man, I love his voice in here too. The Hey Joe, yeah, it's really good stuff. Manic Depression is actually a really good song too on here. I don't know if it was a hit song. I feel like it could have been a song on the radio as well. It's a really good song. And then side 2, you got The Wind Cries Mary, another really cool song. It's not one of his more heavy rock songs, a little more chill, I would say, a little slower maybe, but still it's got the guitar playing is still phenomenal. And just the style, the melody and everything is really great. Fire is an incredible rock song. It's one of the best rock songs on this album that's not a huge hit. It should have been a huge hit because Fire is, again, another one where the guitar playing is just out of this world good. Foxy Lady, the other song on here, I absolutely love. One of my favorite of his. I first introduced to Foxy Lady on Wayne's World with Garth lip syncing to Foxy Lady. It's kind of a funny song, just the name Foxy Lady. It's just a funny name, but man, is it a cool rock song. Another great one. So yeah, this has 5 or 6 just absolutely banger songs on it. I would say there's a couple songs that are a little long, like Third Stone from the Sun, Our Experience is okay, I Don't Live Today. They're a little bit too guitar heavy. Sometimes he can overdo it on the guitar and just feels like the whole song's just one long guitar solo, which I don't like necessarily. I do love his guitar solos within the song. But anyways, just say this is absolutely phenomenal record. I think it's an absolute essential record for anybody that wants to get into record buying should get into Jimi Hendrix, because he's definitely one of the greats. Anyway, so that's his first album. It spends 33 weeks on the charts, peaking at number 2 in the UK. So yeah, just absolutely phenomenal. It does very well, and it's number 2 because another big album came out that time period, and that is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Of course, would be number 1 for a very long time. It's one of those things where Sgt. Pepper's doesn't come out. I mean, this is the number 1 record. Unfortunately, nobody could beat Sgt. Pepper's at that time. That was one of the biggest records of all time. Groundbreaking for the Beatles as well. Beatles were also obviously the biggest band still at that point, but still pretty good for a debut record. Number 2, right behind the Beatles, and spending a lot of time in the charts. Yeah, in the US it goes number 5, so it's so top 5 for both US and UK. Interesting because he comes out of London kind of, so it feels like he's almost does better in the UK, even though he's actually American. But yeah. So then Hendrix goes to what's called the Monterey Pop Festival, and he destroys his guitar at the end. He bashes it, he sets it on fire, and he definitely makes an impression on everybody. Everybody's like, oh, what the heck? Definitely shows up his showmanship, besides, playing backwards, playing with his teeth. He did all that stuff. But then he also showed his destruction, which was very popular during this period. I feel like The Who made it very popular. They're kind of the people that first did that. Maybe, I don't know if they're the first ones to make it a real big deal of breaking your weapons on stage. In fact, I thought I heard it said that The Who played before Jimi Hendrix played, and Jimi Hendrix saw them destroying their instruments, and he didn't want to be outdone, so he set his guitar on fire. So everybody's like, okay, he really, The Who did a lot, but this guy means business. He's setting his stinking guitar on fire, which for me, I don't like that, because I'm like, man, the guitar it's such a cool instrument. Like, why do you want to destroy a guitar? Anyways, but it was done all for the showmanship, and it's shocking, and that's kind of just the time period of, I think, anti-establishment, being rebellious, and doing something you never think someone should do, like breaking your instruments, But yeah, that was definitely a big moment for him at the Monterey Pop Festival. Also, another big moment is after, like a week after Sgt. Pepper's comes out, I think, um, in the US or whatever, in UK. Jimi Hendrix, two of the Beatles, I think it was like Paul and George or something like that, two of the Beatles went to a Jimi Hendrix concert, and Jimi Hendrix started the concert playing Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the song from the record. And Paul, I know, has said on in an interview that he was super impressed with that the record had only been out for a week and Jimi Hendrix already learned the song and was playing it in concert. So I always thought that was an interesting story. His second album is called Axis Bold of Love, and it comes out also in 1967. So he has two albums in 1967, which I don't own anymore. I just own the Are You Experience, but this is another big record for them. In the UK, it peaked at number 3. In the US, it was number 5 in the UK and number 3 in the US. So again, top 5 in both countries. There wasn't really any big hits though off the album. There's not anything as well known. I feel like, in fact, I almost would say like 90% of their hits were off of this album. This definitely was like their big hit album. It does have a song that I think is really good called Little Wing. It's probably the most well-known song that you probably would know. It's probably been played. I don't know if it's been played on the radio, but you probably heard it in a movie or a show. Anyways, and it's definitely a recognizable. First time I heard it, I was like, oh, this sounds recognizable. But Little Wing is an absolutely excellent song. I think my favorite song off of that album, Axis Bold of Love. I'm not a big fan of Axis Bold of Love. Like I said, it doesn't have a lot of big hits on it. Little Wing is definitely the best thing on there. It has a couple other good stuff. If I remember right, it seems like it's maybe even a long album. I don't know if it was a double. No, the third one was double, sorry. I don't know. It's not as big for me. It's my least favorite. But I've heard some people say it's their favorite album, so it's each to their own, I guess. Still shows off his great guitar playing skills again. So his third album, and basically last album that he'd come out with, is Electric Ladyland, and that comes out in 1968. So within 2 years, he comes out with all 3 of his albums that he'll come out with, which is weird. So, man, in 2 years, that's all we get out of Jimi Hendrix, and he still made such a big impression all these years later. I mean, 60-some years later, I mean, we're still talking about this guy being one of the biggest and one of the best guitar players of all time, and just big moments in music history, and groundbreaking and influential to the future. I mean, in just a short amount of time. The only people I can think of that's done that is maybe like Buddy Holly, you know, has had a short time period and yet was very influential to everybody afterwards. Interesting enough. I do like Electric Ladyland quite a bit. I don't have that record. I need to get that at some point. It was a double LP, this one, and it's my second favorite behind this one. During the recording, he had a falling out with his producer Chandler, though. They weren't getting along. I think at this time, Hendrix was getting a little bit of an ego. He was definitely, you know, he's famous now. He's a big celebrity. And I feel like, I don't know, he was getting a little more controlling from what I'm reading about him. He was very controlling, big ego, was maybe not the nicest guy at this time period. And that's where a lot of relationships seem to be falling out at this point, even though it's only like two years into his being really huge and his only 3 albums in. But the album goes number 6 in the UK and goes number 1 in the US. So it is the one album that goes number 1. So he has a number 1 album there. So obviously, because the 2 albums before were huge as well, it helps each time an album comes out, people are really excited to get it. Really has one big hit song on it, and that is All Along the Watchtower, which is probably arguably his biggest hit, and for most people, probably his best song. Definitely one of my favorite songs of his as well. One of the most iconic is, of course, a Bob Dylan song, which Bob Dylan's version is actually pretty good, but Jimi Hendrix totally took over the song. And I think Bob Dylan said that the song is now Jimi Hendrix. So we associate All Along the Watchtower more with Jimi Hendrix than we do Bob Dylan, even though Bob Dylan wrote the song. But Jimi Hendrix definitely made it a bigger song and made it more famous with that intro. Again, just an amazing intro, amazing guitar. He's got that, I don't know how he does that, the different sound effects he makes on the guitar is just amazing. And it just makes it a really cool rock song. It's a folk song, turns into an amazing rock song here. Just a huge achievement, I think. Love what he did with Along the Watchtower. The song itself went number 20 in the UK and number 5 in the US. So a little bigger in the US, but still top 20 song in both countries. Like I said, he didn't have like a lot of, like I said, he had 3 hit songs on the first album, none on the second, and 1 on the third. So not really known for his big hit singles necessarily, but his albums did very well. He did also have another song called "Burning of the Midnight Lamp" that went number 18 in the UK, but didn't chart in the US. So that also did chart. Noel Redding, the bass player, again was not getting along really with Jimi Hendrix. I think he wanted a little more. He wanted to feel more like part of the band, and Jimi Hendrix definitely was controlling of everything in the recording at this point and made all the shots. And he also sometimes took a long time took a lot of takes on a record because he wanted to be perfectionist. And this was definitely getting on the nerves of some of the band members like Noel Redding, who kind of wanted to maybe go out and have more control over his music. Anyway, so Noel would quit the band in 1969 because of all this. Hendrix would replace Redding with Billy Cox, his friend that we talked about before from the Army, would replace him at bass. And he also named Michael Jeffrey his producer, I guess, because Chase Chandler also quit managing him. So we got Michael Jeffrey at this point. And then in '69, the big moment here is Woodstock, in which Hendrix closes out the show, which is pretty big. I mean, to say here's the biggest concert of the biggest names we ever had, basically, for the most part, in 1969, and we want Jimi Hendrix to close it out, which is really cool, and probably one of the highlights for me, definitely one of the big highlights of the concert is him playing at the end. He plays with Cox on bass, and a guy named Buddy Miles joins him on drums for the concert. They made, let's see, wait a minute. I know I got that wrong. I'm reading my notes wrong here. That's afterwards. So I think he still has Mitch Mitchell maybe still playing with him, but I don't think Noel Redding was. But the big thing was the Star Spangled Banner. He came out and played that distorted, it's kind of the sequential Star Spangled Banner performance of all time. And he was just throwing in all kinds of, somehow he played, I thought he did justice to, also, Star Spangled Banner is the most sacred song to American, so you don't want to play around with the song or do it injustice. I feel like the guitar playing did justice to the song, yet put his own spin on it, so I think it's really cool. Anyways, that's one of the big moments, besides playing some of his big songs there at Woodstock. So Hendrix would reform the band with Cox and Buddy Miles on drums. That's what I was meant to say. So he got a guy named Buddy Miles to play drums. So at this point, Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding, the original members, are out of the group, and he got some more new members to form the band. Anyways, they did make a live album called Band of Gypsies in 1970, and it reached top 10 in the UK and the US. So this is not a studio album, it's a live album, I guess, that they made with new material, though, I think. So I've never heard this album, didn't know it existed until I was doing my research, so that's kind of interesting. Anybody out there can tell me what they probably heard this live album, what they think about it. But I think they did some live concerts, and the idea was that they're going to do some live concerts and turn into an album. And so I think they did 2 or 3 live concerts and then turned all those songs into this album that they did. It was kind of the whole plan of that, anyways. But Jeffrey, the manager, really wanted to get the original band back together, because that was when they were really successful, and wanted to put out a new album with the Jimi Hendrix Experience, because they basically weren't the Jimi Hendrix Experience anymore at this point. So he did actually fire Buddy Miles and Billy Cox. I guess he had that power to fire them, and he really wanted to get Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell back into the band, basically. I don't know, I didn't really read exactly what Hendrix thought of that. I wouldn't think he'd be too happy, because he was one who put the group together for the live album. But anyway, so we kind of get down to Hendrix's last days, unfortunately. He was working on a new album called Cry of Love, but he never finishes this album. He was touring in Europe, and he last played a concert at the Isle of Fehmarn Festival in West Germany. That was the last concert he was seen at, anyways. He then went back to England, and he was last seen jamming with Eric Burdon and his band War. So Eric Burdon, the lead singer of the Animals, of course, and his first manager was a player for the Animals. So we get that all back together with must have been close to Eric Burdon maybe at this time. Anyway, so he was the last person really kind of to play with Jimi Hendrix, anyways. Because like the next day, he was found dead in his hotel room, September 18th, 1970. He officially died of asphyxia, intoxicated with barbiturates and sleeping pills. So he took some sleeping pills, some barbiturates, and threw up and, like, you know, drowned in his own throw up, basically, which has happened to some people, musicians, other musicians I've heard of. That's an unfortunate thing that happens quite often when you're doing drugs, anyway. So obviously Jimi Hendrix was a huge drug user, all kinds of drugs, and like I said, had definitely some problematic personality flaws, but not taken away. He was definitely one of the greatest musicians of all time. Like I said, my favorite guitar player, and made some absolutely incredible music in only 2 years. He made one of the greatest records, in my opinion, with this one, Our Experience, which one I definitely love to listen to today anyway. So another sad death for another great artist, unfortunately, who died at 27, part of that club of 27, all these young musicians dying, unfortunately, due to drug abuse, which happened a lot in the 60s. It was a huge problem. 60s into the 70s, I should say. Also in the 70s, huge problem anyways. And unfortunately still happens today. That's part of the rock and roll lifestyle, I guess. Anyway, so please feel free to comment. What do you think about Jimi Hendrix? What is your favorite album, song, anything you'd like to say? I'd love to read it. And hopefully you enjoyed this deep dive on a great artist, Jimi Hendrix. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for liking it. Thank you to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you later.